we're shooting a spec piece. Welcome back to the channel. Robert Teegarden here again, posting content on filmmaking tips and the business of being a creative. With me as always today is Reese.
Hello.
And we are going to be shooting a spec piece, a brand building piece for this company called Pathwater. We wanted to take you guys through this process of seeing exactly how we do this, the tech that we use, and the camera settings and things like that we use to pull this stuff off. One of the main rigs that we're going to be using is this Edelkrone Head 1. Got this Edelkrone Head 1 for a variety of reasons. I have the Rhino Arc 2 slider, which we will be using extensively for this shoot, but also wanted to have the ability to kind of rotate and use this as more or less a tabletop spinner, and a couple other ideas that I have with this thing as well. So one of the big things that we want to be able to do is make sure that we're color matching everything. We're basically trying to shoot this thing as if it was a paid gig, trying to make it look as super professional as possible. A lot of care was taken into getting the actual bottles, making sure that the bottles are correct. But we want to do a couple like stereotypical beverage shots, right? Yeah, we want to make the audience thirsty. Yeah, that's the main objective of this thing, is to make the viewer thirsty and want Pathwater itself. There's also a story behind this bottle, as we mentioned. Not sure how much we'll get into that, but refill, not landfill. So a lot of eco-consciousness that's involved in this brand. Yeah, we might incorporate some ocean shots, maybe some landfill stuff, just to kind of bring home the environment aspect of what they're trying to do. Not too over the top, but maybe a little bit here or there. With that being said, the one thing that we have missing is we have all different color drops except for this one. Yeah, looking for whoever I can talk to for seamless paper drops.
If you want to buy seamless paper, we do sell it here.
It's kind of a weird... We got whatever you need, we got it. So we've got everything set up for our first shot. At least we think so. I'm going to spray the bottle down a little bit more. We've got the Edelkrone Head 1 is going to be spinning into position, and the Rhino Arc 2 is going to be pushing in and lifting up into position. Should be a fairly simple shot, but it took us about an hour to set up, and we'll see how it works out right now. First one looks good. We're gonna go move on. Shot 2. So second shot of details is done. Now we're gonna move on to a couple more less complicated shots. We're gonna do a pouring shot as the sliders kind of rack in from left to right, and the bottle's pouring into a fish tank, I guess. We'll try a fish tank and see how that all works out. So we're gonna try and do those things right now. Okay, so I think we're ready for our most complicated shot, which is pouring this bottle into this tank, all while this slider is moving in a parallax motion. So we've reset the lighting and gotten everything into position. I basically put this together with a C-stand and a boom arm, and put a couple other knuckles and different clamps on the end, right? So you can kind of see a close-up of what we're doing there. And so then I'm going to rotate that boom arm down with my hand on top of the water bottle, Hopefully my big palms can seal that thing enough while Reese hits play and moves the slider, and we should have ourselves a great shot.
Okay, that should be good. Yeah, right there.
Okay, it's tightened. So now hit record first.
Yep.
Hit start on the slider. And I'm gonna let it go.
Starting. It was exactly what we were planning to do.
Yeah.
The consistency of the water is what
was
it
a little
is.
glug.
Yeah, it's
right?
a glug.
Okay, hold on. It's literally that right there. But I'm surprised at how well that worked. Back inside the edit room, which is really just my office, and we're going to take you guys through what the edit looked like. I've gone ahead and finished what this edit is, so I'm just going to backtrack and kind of give you the lowdown on how I accomplished this look. You guys have already seen what the piece looks like at the beginning of the video, but I'm going to show you each individual clip that I did, why I chose the things that I did, show you the sound design that we put behind it, and then the track itself. I'll play it again at the end. Inside Premiere, first thing I want to showcase is the fact that I created a sequence that will live on social 1080 by 1350, so that typical 4:5 format that we're seeing for social. I went ahead and pre-graded my footage and added color correction where necessary. And you see the first shot that we have is the first shot that we accomplished inside the garage studio, which is slow push in and tilt up of the camera. I added some basic speed ramping, which I move into time remapping and speed. And you can see that as we get towards the beginning of this shot, we kind of already have it moving in the direction that we want to. And I went ahead and added a couple of different layers of atmosphere that I got from Storyblocks, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. I ended up putting a mask around the bottle, so I still had the detail of the bottle in place, but just on the top, and then feathering it quite a bit at 18% over here. And increase the mass expansion just slightly. That way, when you see this shot, I'll blow it up. When you see this shot on the timeline and how it moves through, you have the movement of the atmosphere or the smoke around it, but it's not actually competing with the clarity that we get at the end of that shot for the bottle therein. So the next thing I moved to is the tight details of the shot. You guys remember that we had it just on a spinner at 100 mil macro, and we speed ramp into that shot as well, right into the perfect place that reveals the logo here. We move forward in our timeline, speed ramping out of that shot, and here's where we start to get into more of the story of the brand, in the sense that it's purified water and that they want you to refill the bottle, not simply throw it in the landfill. The way that we accomplished it was by going through to Storyblocks and got some aerial footage of an Icelandic glacier, which is what we did here. And then what I did here in order to create a nice strong parallax effects, which I'll show in a second, is that I keyframed this shot quite a bit. This keyframe I started at 165%, and the shot itself is moving forward in time, so I ended up pulling back on the actual clip in my keyframes so that it gave that cool parallax effect. So as the reveal was coming up like this, I was able to move in parallax motion, added some keyframes not only for the scaling and position, but also for speed ramping, and was able to kind of accomplish what I needed to that way. The next shot we went into is our pouring shot. Now I'm gonna blow up this nested sequence just so you can see how we accomplish this. Now, if you remember, we shot this in S&Q mode on the Sony at 240 frames a second. So technically this is a 1080 or full HD shot, but it actually cleaned up really, really well with a bit of color grading that you can see here. I have some denoise and colorista that are coming from Red Giant effects. I also do a little bit of coloring in terms of hue versus saturation and hue versus hue in my Lumetri color panel. So you'll see what that looks like here in terms of making those blues just a little bit more crisp. And then there was a magenta shift inside of the whites itself. So we're able to accomplish that with this secondary colorista layer and just pulling out some of that magenta and moving it back into the green. So that's just really what I did for almost every shot in terms of how these things were colored to get that true crisp white, but also the deep blues that we are looking for to really sell this piece. Back in the nested sequence for our first pour shot, you can see that I speed ramped into this shot here.
pretty significantly and slowed it back down. So we start fast and then we move into these bigger, slower pours and then speed ramp back out of it. I didn't keyframe anything there. I didn't move that along at all. I just kind of kept things consistent where that shot was concerned. I nested that clip so that I could be able to do more things within my timeline. Speaking of that, we're back in the timeline here. Now, the big thing that I wanted to sell was some sort of text animation for this thing. And so how we accomplished that was that we created multiple layers, one that said water and one that said purified, and I created a stroke for the purified and then a full fill layer for the water just to add some diversity in what the text layers look like there. Then I created a mask for each layer that you can see here that I had to then keyframe as the water moves around. I had to keyframe the mask so that it was able, let me make this a little bit bigger, so that it was able to knock out the text in the purified and keeping the water over the top. And I did that both for water and for purified, as you saw. So here's the one for water as we're moving around. And you can see that it took a lot of time to feather things and get it to move correctly. You can see how many keyframes that I have in each individual mask layer. But I think that that really sells the idea of purified water and keeps us engaged with what the water is doing rather than just making it a kind of static shot there. The next part that we wanted to move into is purified water and then the landfill aspect of it. So we were able to find more shots on story blocks. Again, just an insane resource for stock footage and other effects that are there. This one really helped us a ton, and with a little bit of sound design, we were able to pull this off nicely. Again, speed ramping is really the biggest transition that we had with this piece. And so we moved from this stock landfill piece into our landfill, not refill. Again, did the exact same technique here in masking out each individual piece of the text that I wanted things to move through. You can see the different text layers are here as well. So a mask for refill and a mask for landfill. Again, something I thought that was a really interesting, cool technique. And the last thing was just our hero shot, which is the 3-up of what we had there, kind of the flying V, one in the front, 2 in the back there. Again, we just kind of pushed back, added some atmosphere and keyed out the bottles that you can see here as well. And so once we get to the end, you really see that that is a static shot, and you can see the smoke start to move around in this little area. Once we were done with the blocking and the initial effects that were happening where the text was concerned and the masking therein, it was time to move on to sound design. Now, as you guys know, I come from a music background. That's all the guitars and stuff back here as well. So sound design is a place that's near and dear to my heart. I try to keep my visual timelines very simple and compact. That's why you're not seeing a ton of stuff going on. We nested a few layers and just made certain effects that are stacked on top. But this timeline could be a lot more messy than it is now. And I'm sure you've seen timelines like that. But when it comes to my audio, this is really when we start to play around and have a lot of fun. So let me collapse my video layer since we went through there, and we'll make our, I'm using Control plus and minus and Alt plus and minus to make these things larger. And then I'm just gonna move this up so you can see the audio here. So as you would think, a lot of these things really are sold by the sound design that you put on there. So whooshes, different drops, effects, and things like that that we can do to sell what we're seeing. I always say 70% of what you see is sound, and sound really helps create the full wrap of what you're going to experience. So a ton of different whooshes and atmosphere that's in here as well. All of these things are from either Pond 5, Epidemic Sound. I've even pulled some things from Artlist, or I'm just constantly creating and or downloading my own sound effects library. At this point, I have a couple of gigs worth of WAV and MP3 files that I'm always adding to and pulling from and or creating on my own. So sound design, again, for me is just a huge part, and it should be for you too. So this is what it sounds like with the sound design in it. Let me just bump the volume so you guys can hear it, and I'll let it play through a few times, giving us a nice endpoint. So here it is. Here's one more time. So there you go. So here's a couple techniques that I use that'll probably help make your life a little bit easier. The first one really comes in terms of where things come in and out and keyframing your volume or your amplitude in terms of where these effects lie. So here's a pretty decent example in terms of what the ocean sound should be, and it clues the viewer in if you put it a few frames before that something's coming, right? So you can see this is where that clip actually starts, but we're adding some of the seagulls and some of the ocean ambience to that earlier on so that you can actually hear that something's coming again. You can see that I kind of keyframe this up to add the volume as it's coming in so it's not super abrupt, and then it naturally tapers off so I don't have a keyframe there. But you can see in other instances I have quite a few that are in there as well. So here's that purified water, and what you're hearing are some of these glugs. And so they stay hanging on at the end of that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different frames after that clip ends. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, if you right click on this little stack here and it says show audio time units, instead of going for individual frames, you have a much smaller range that you can actually affect where your cursor is concerned. It doesn't happen if you don't have show audio time units on, because you're then just relegated to the frames that this particular sequence, 24 frames a second for this sequence, is being captured at. So in order to move around with more precise measurements, that's something that we're able to use so that we can kind of place these audio instances or these audio tracks in the exact spot that we want them. So just click this audio time units or show audio time units on and off to be able to do that. And now you'll see that my cursor moves around a lot more and I can't actually get in as far. This is as far magnified as I can be on that sequence. So really helpful tip right there. Once we were finished with that, we added our track that we got from Epidemic Sounds, and I'm going to play this thing in its entirety on the way out just one more time. If you like the video, like the damn video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for post notifications. Once again, I post content on a weekly basis on filmmaking tips, the business of being a creative. We're going to be posting a lot more of these, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts and comments are about bringing you along on how we create these types of pieces and giving you a back end look on how you can move where these types of things are concerned. With that in mind, this is Teegarden with another video in the can. Here is the final video.